Inner
Mm-hmm.
peace is not simply a destination. It really is a part of a journey. And that you can have peace on Monday and fall to pieces on Tuesday. And it's just part of being human. And it doesn't invalidate your faith. It's actually the journey of faith.
It's our limiting beliefs that ultimately keep us from becoming the best we're capable of becoming. Something's got to change, but that change has to happen first on the inside. It's time to get unstuck. It's time to get your why back. It's never too late. Let's start today.
Helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out. This is Win Today. And now, here's your host, Christopher Cook.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the show this week. Thanks as always for the download. I really believe that this week's conversation is going to turn the key on something that you and I need more of each and every day, and that's peace. You know, atop the list of things you and I were designed to never live without is in fact peace. My friend, you know this as well as I do. Disappointment, anger, fear, pain, and even discouragement clouds our perception of everything: our relationships, our job, our emotional well-being, and even our personal sense of purpose. It's precisely why we need a strong dose of truth to provide perspective and empowerment in the midst of any difficulty we face in life. Maybe right now, as you're listening to me speak, you're holed up in a job you hate, a relationship you resent, and a life you wish wasn't yours. So right now you're saying, yes, Chris, yes, I need peace. I get it. Well, here's the truth about peace as you'll learn today. Lasting inner peace is not a destination, it's a journey. And your own personal struggle is not a lack of faith. It is, in fact, the journey of faith. I'm going to say that again. Your own personal struggle is not a lack of faith, my friend. It is the journey of faith itself. And according to today's guest, Erwin McManus, the world around us is not disconnected from the world within us. Erwin McManus is an iconoclast, artist, and cultural thought leader known for his integration of creativity and spirituality. He's the founder and lead pastor of Mosaic, a Los Angeles-based church recognized as one of America's most influential and innovative churches. Engaging such issues as culture, creativity, change, and leadership, Erwin is widely known as a thought-provoking communicator, poet, and wordsmith. His travels have taken him to over 50 countries, where he has spoken to over 1 million people from a wide variety of audiences, from professional sports, Wall Street investors, universities, film studios, and conferences across the world. In today's conversation, you're going to learn why inner peace does not happen by accident, but instead through intention, and why some people take themselves too seriously, and that's why they don't have the energy to do serious things. This is a loaded conversation, my friend. Easily one of the most riveting I've ever had here on the show. So let's get right to it. My conversation with Erwin McManus. Erwin, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
I'm so honored to be here with you.
Thanks so much. Well, listen, I want to dive right into this conversation because when I read your book, I thought, man, this is a message everyone needs to hear. And you start the book in such a unique fashion. So, Erwin, take us back. You were driving through Los Angeles and you heard a subtle whisper in your heart. The warrior is not ready for battle until they have come to know peace. What do you think surrounded that statement in your own life? Talk to us about that.
Well, whenever you have a moment of inspiration, it's really the convergence of a lot of seemingly disparate experiences and thoughts and insights coming together. And I live here in LA. I've been here for almost 30 years, and we're in the middle of some of the most creative people in the world. And from an outside vantage point, you have the most attractive, talented, creative, gifted, passionate people. But when you step inside, you realize that there's so much brokenness and disconnection, and 24-year-olds struggling with panic attacks, and 26-year-olds on medication for depression, and teenagers struggling with suicidal thoughts, and all of this really was converging inside of me, dealing with the fact that there's almost like two different narratives taking place. One where we look like we have it all together, and the one where we're completely falling apart. And I feel like that's really what informed a lot of this book is that people of faith, especially, I found, didn't have a language to deal effectively with all the inner struggles they're going through. And a lot of times they feel really defeated because if they share with someone they're depressed, or if they share that they're struggling with anxiety, they're just told, well, trust God, and Jesus is your peace, and you'll get a verse, and then you're supposed to be okay. And when you're not okay, you wonder if your faith is not valid, because that's the way it's almost communicated. And I wanted to say, nah, this inner world is a real world, and this struggle is not a one-time struggle. Inner peace is not simply a destination. It really is a part of a journey, and that you can have peace on Monday and fall to pieces on Tuesday, and it's just part of being human, and it doesn't invalidate your faith. It's actually the journey of faith.
Do you think the Christianese labels we so often put over circumstances, very real circumstances, actually do more harm than good? It's like it doesn't invalidate the truth of the word. It's just to say we put these blanket Christianese statements on things and then don't allow ourselves to process what's actually happening. Do you think that's sort of the core issue?
Well, I think a huge part of it is that, if you look even at the culture of the 50s, without just looking at Christianity, we had a culture that was aspirational, but not actually real. And so that you had perfect families, and you had, perfect schools, and you had perfect dating relationships, and everything looked so good on the outside, and everything was already falling apart on the inside. And the church was even more so, I think, a part of the systemic problem. And so, we created cliches because we really were afraid to deal with the real issues inside of a person's life. And I didn't grow up in church, and I didn't grow up as a person of faith. And so it really caught me by surprise how many of our answers were almost like magic. We just hoped if you said the right thing, or if you believed the right thing, that somehow that fixed you. And we're really treating the inner issues of the human spirit as almost simplistic issues. And we need to realize that humans are complex, they're deep, the issues are profound, and they take real thought to get through this.
Indeed. Well, staying there, Erwin, you wrote that all the violence we see in the world is but a small glimpse of the violence that churns in us. That's such a strong statement. So in order for us to deal with the conflict around us, what I hear you saying is we must first deal with the conflict within us. So here's the question: where do we start?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the things we have to come to grips with, is that the world around us is not disconnected from the world within us. It is a reflection of the world within us, and we're never going to have world peace until we have inner peace. And the reason we have war and terrorism and violence is that there's anger and rage and bitterness and racism that exists within us, and if we don't deal with these inner struggles, and they're eventually going to find a way to manifest themselves in the world around us. And it's a challenging thing, because even like when you look at religion, when you look at institutions like religion or government, when you look at laws, they're all ways of slowing down the destructive momentum of humans. Even guilt and shame has been one of the mechanisms through which religion tries to get people to not do as many bad things. And governments exist not because people will be unrelentingly good, but governments exist because without some kind of constraints, it seems that we might actually really destroy each other. Yeah. And I remember years ago, I was in the White House. Oh my gosh, probably 30 years ago, and I was meeting with the head of what was called Star Wars at the time, and they were talking about how our system of peace on a global level is what's called mutually assured destruction, which of course spells out MAD, and the only way we have world peace is that the Russians believe we could wipe them out. We believe the Russians could wipe us out. China believed that we could all wipe each other out. So the only way we can sustain the peace is that everyone's terrified that the other one can destroy the other. And this should let you know, like systemically, there's something wrong, where the only thing that holds the peace is the fear that all of us will destroy each other. There has to be a different solution. And I'm convinced that's exactly why Jesus came, that the solution to the human problem can only be solved one life at a time.
It's so true. Just to echo what you said, Erwin, it's so true that the world within us becomes the world around us. I'd love to know, just pulling the curtain back, how do you tackle this truth in your own life?
Well, I think I really had to start grappling with this when I was really young, because I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. I never knew my real father. My grandparents were the first parents I remembered. Then my mom and my stepdad, who she married, became, my core family. And it never really psychologically worked for me. I know they did the best they could, but I was always really tormented, and by no fault of their own. It's just the reality of being a kid and trying to grapple with who you are. So by the time I was 12 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair, and I was a pretty broken human being. So I know this journey from the inside out, and I didn't have a faith to hold on to, or a faith community or a culture that was informing me. So I had to just process this on my own and figure out, okay, how do I pull myself out of this level of despair? Because my inner world was a world of depression and despair. I disconnected myself with the world around me very early, and found myself always hiding in this inner world. And times I would be completely unaware of what was going on around me, because I was completely living in the world within me. And one of the things I had to begin to do is I started looking for beauty all around me. If I didn't take time to find something beautiful, I would get trapped inside of this world of despair. And then I began to create a posture of gratitude. I just started looking for things that I could be grateful for, to hold on to, so that I didn't feel like everything in my life was negative and destructive. And it's kind of interesting, because when, I feel like all those things prepared me for faith in Jesus. And there's some of that came even after coming to know Jesus. But I would say that my inner world has been reshaped by, one, taking control of my memories, realizing that you don't remember your past. Your past is what you remember. And you have to decide where you will allow your mind to go. And my mind would always go back to 5 or 6 really painful memories. And so that became who I was. So I began rewriting my past by choosing to remember beautiful moments, extraordinary moments that gave me a sense of meaning or worth or value. And so I began taking ownership over my memories, my thoughts, and writing my future, not on the memories that were most negative, but on the ones that were most positive. And then using the negative experiences to develop empathy. I felt like, all right, all those negative experiences can be my way of understanding, connecting to people who are in pain. And ironically, I didn't know that I was going to come to faith. I didn't know that one day I would be speaking, to millions of people around the world. But I think one of the things that helps me connect so deeply to people is that I took all the pain in my life and I turned it into the material from which I learned how to communicate.
Yeah, it's really true, and I believe it's true, as you said, that if we allow it, pain can become a platform to bring hope and life to other people. And it sounds like, too, that just to swing in I would say a core principle from your book, you developed a disciplined soul. So I'd love to ask then, what does a disciplined soul look like in all of our lives?
Well, one thing I would say is that discipline is not the same thing as structure. And when I became a person of faith, everybody tried to structure me, and it was very difficult because the dominant American Christian culture is a very linear, very systematic, very routine culture. And the way we teach discipleship is you do this, this, and this, and you do it this way, and this way, and this way. And so I thought, all right. So I started having this self-perception that I was undisciplined because I was unstructured. I've been married 35 years now, and my wife will tell you I'm probably one of the most disciplined people she knows. And but I'm not structured. I don't do everything at the same time every day. I don't have the same routine every day. I adapt very much to how the days are being designed and what I want to accomplish in my life. But I've written 10 books and I've run 4 or 5 companies at one time.
Oh my gosh.
And I always have time to play basketball and go see movies and hang out with my kids and my wife. What I tell people is, look, it's not about time management. It's about energy management. And you need to understand what actually energizes you and what steals your energy. You need to look at your life and go, what are the things that actually advance your intention and your mission in life? And what are the things that are distracting you from it and stealing your strength and energy from the things you're supposed to accomplish? I think that one of the things I've been really, really good at in my life is to focus my life on the things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, to never take myself so seriously to think that the world is resting on my shoulders. And so I can learn. I know how to laugh and play and enjoy life, and because I think some people take themselves way too seriously, and that's why they don't have the energy to do serious things.
Oh my gosh, that's a loaded statement. Erwin, I don't want to oversimplify what you just said, but I want to distill that down for everyone joining this conversation with us. What I heard you say, at least I think, is that you then in your own life make decisions from core values, not necessarily boxes to be checked or an itinerary for the day. Is that correct? Is that too simplistic?
No, I think that's a really good way of describing it. And
okay.
And my wife is more structured, and probably less disciplined, and I'm more disciplined and definitely less structured. And so when we began our life together, it was always a challenge, because early on she would say, well, you're not disciplined. And then I would say, hey, let's look at our outcomes and let's, and she goes, I know your outcomes are magic. She would say, because when a highly structured person looks at a non-structured person who's highly disciplined, they can't figure out how they accomplish so much.
Yes.
But I know that I can accomplish more in 3 hours than most people accomplish in 10. And so I write my books, but I'm always creating, I'm always writing, I'm always gathering information, I'm always adding to what's there. And then when I write a book, I write it really fast. I mean, my smallest book is called The Barbarian Way, and I wrote that probably 20 years ago. But I wrote that book in 10 hours.
Oh my gosh!
And I did all the editing, and everything, and the editing included in those 10 hours. And people, well, wait a minute, how do you write a book in 10 hours? Well, it's 40 years and 10 hours. But when I write, I'm hyper focused, and so when I write, I can write. In my worst hours, I write 10 pages an hour, and in my best moments, I write 30 pages an hour.
Yeah.
And, and it's because I have learned the ability of hyper focus. And so I write for 3 hours and then I stop. Then I go play basketball or go to a movie or go get a great meal. I don't try to pull out of myself that level of production for 8 hours. I'll be sitting there for 5 hours doing nothing.
Yeah.
And so then I just shift my energy and do something else that, re-energizes me, and then I come back the next day and write another 3 hours. So when I write a book, I never write more than 3 hours a day, probably. And but I'll never probably write less than 30 pages in a day.
Wow.
And so it's finding out what you're good at, giving it all the energy and intention it deserves, cutting out the things in your life that you're doing out of obligation, not out of intention, and then finding a rhythm that works for you.
Yes.
My wife, she's a morning person. She wakes up at 4 because she grew up on a farm and she thinks there's still cows to milk, and for a lot of years in her life, she would literally be waking up when I was going to bed.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually a person who has a massive need for introverted time. And on a lot of the tests, I'm an extreme introvert. But I live a very extroverted life.
Yes.
And the way I'm able to do that, because I find a lot of introverts use introversion as an excuse to be non-relational.
So true.
Right. And a lot of extroverts use extroversion as an excuse to be non-reflective. And I go, look, how you're designed is where you start, not where you're supposed to finish.
Wow.
And so I wait till everybody goes to sleep, and then I have my time by myself. And I need it. And I do that every single day. And it's actually what replenishes me. Those 12 hours where I'm around humans are not the part that energizes me and re-energizes me. I need that time by myself, and I get that once everybody's in bed. And and I just learn a rhythm and a pattern that works for me. And I think that's really important for everyone. And if you're structured, realize you actually operate better when you're structured. Being structured is not a deficiency. It's not a weakness. It's how you execute your life best. But just make sure in that structure, you actually have your priorities. Because what about if you structure your whole day doing things that you're going to look back and say, I can't believe I spent my whole life doing that.
Yes.
So make sure you put values inside of your structure.
Wow, that's really good. What I can deduce from what you just said is if peace was on the bullseye on a target, when we pull the arrow back, being extroverted or introverted or whatever is filling us up and however we're wired, we're shooting at a target called peace. And I think that's the beautiful part about even your book. You wrote that peace can only come when it's fought for then, and it seems contradictory in nature, but I'd love for you to unpack that for us.
Sure, I love contradictions. And so
Yeah.
because I think it forces us to think things through more carefully. But what I want people to understand is that inner peace does not happen through apathy. Inner peace does not happen by accident. Inner peace only happens through intention. And I think a lot of times we only fight for our peace when we're finally drowning in our chaos. And you have to make decisions every day to fight away depression, discouragement, anxiety, fear, stress. And you have to take time every day to, and I hope people understand this language, to center yourself, to remember what your life is about. And one of the most important things is to stop trying to control the things that are out of your control and to take control of the things that are within your control. This for me has been my lifelong challenge. I am a dysfunctional savior. I get myself confused with Jesus all the time. I keep trying to do what only he can do. And I can't fix other people. I can't change other people. I have no control over some of the circumstances in life. And what happens when you spend your energy trying to control what you have no control over is you don't have the energy to put on the things you do have control over. So you end up abdicating control. So the reason I talk about fighting for peace is that peace will not come to you by accident. It will not come to you through passivity. It will not come to you even through desperation. Peace only comes when you start fighting for that peace by making the choices that create peace within you. And that's why I wrote 8 different codes, is because I feel like those codes are actually a framework from which you can begin to live your life and live at peace.
Well, Erwin, let's unpack one of those codes specifically. In your book, you wrote that the warrior seeks to become invisible. I'm really intrigued by that. Would you teach us about this?
Yeah, I feel like one of the cultural dynamics, especially among young pastors, is that there's so much pressure to be famous. And ever since, the emergence of social media with Instagram and Twitter, and you literally have Instagram stars, and you have people who are Insta famous, and I feel like there's so much pressure to be visible, and rather than actually to be substantive. And so people are making decisions right now that make them famous, and they're actually losing their chance for greatness. And because there's a difference between being great and being famous. And so the reason I wrote that code was because one of the keys to inner peace is to stop living your life for the affirmation of others and by the opinion of others. And when you choose to be invisible, what that means is you live a life to serve rather than to be seen. You resolve in your own heart that if what you do matters, it doesn't matter if someone knows what you do. And I've had so many young leaders come to me and say, how can I do what you're doing? And when I tell them the journey that I took, they said, well, no, we don't feel called to do that, but we want to do what you're doing. And I realized, oh, everybody wants to speak, but no one necessarily wants to have something to say. You know, everyone wants to learn how to be a better writer, but no one wants to necessarily live a better life. And we have a disconnection between the invisible process that actually defines greatness and the visible product that we would describe as fame. And as long as you pursue fame, you will not have inner peace.
Wow. Just out of curiosity, you know, if people said to you, Erwin, oh, we don't feel called to that, what are the things that you did in the invisible, so to speak? What are the disciplines? What are the rhythms? What are the things that you did daily that said, you know what, this is a core value? Again, we've touched on core values. This is a core value from which I'm going to live. What are some of those things in your own life?
Well, I mean, they're more macro than micro because I spent 10 years working with the urban poor.
Wow.
You know, and so, I mean, my life was with people in extreme poverty. I worked with, in the world of drug cartels and street gangs and prostitution, drug addiction, extreme poverty. And no one really was there watching me do that. That was just me and Kim working. And for probably the first 20 years of my life, our combined income was probably never over $35,000 a year. And for the first 10 years, I don't think I ever made more than $10,000 a year. And so I never pursued wealth or fame. And my wife and I slept on the floor because we couldn't afford a bed when we were first married. And a lot of people, they want the outcome of our life, but they do not want our life. And, you know, and so I went at the age of 29. I had never spoken probably more than to, I'm going to exaggerate, okay? But if you'll forgive the exaggeration, my largest crowd up to them was probably 200 people. And it could have been less. I'm going to push it because maybe on Easter, I spoke to 200 people. And I was working backstage at an event, just kind of, you know, in a very menial kind of role, completely irrelevant. And the speaker didn't show up at this event. And there are 20,000 people in an arena where the Dallas Mavericks play basketball. And there were probably 20 professional preachers there, all wearing their suits. And I'm there in blue jeans and tennis shoes in the back, just volunteering. And the guy in charge comes and says, I think God wants you to speak. And I thought he was joking with me. And I started laughing. And then he grabbed me and told me, I think God wants you to speak. And I said, well, gosh, I'll need a Bible. And I didn't even have a Bible with me. And I fell on my face and I wept out of sheer fear and panic. And I was almost 30 years old. It was right when I was 29, almost 30. I went from speaking to 50 people every week to speaking to 20,000 with about 45 minutes of notice. And I would have never been in that moment if I had just not been willing to serve. I wasn't in that room going, I'm going to speak. It wasn't even in my mind. I think a lot of us, we're trying to make the spectacular happen in our life when really our calling is to do the things that serve others. And then God takes those moments and does the spectacular. And, you know, so when you ask me, what are the daily disciplines? You know, my daily discipline was serving people I thought nobody wanted, doing a work I felt nobody else was willing to do. And my prayer was always, God, I want to do what no one else can do or what no one else will do. If someone else can do it, God, choose them. If someone else will do it, God, choose them. And I would always say, I want to do what no one can do or will do. And I do think that's what, in the end, drove me to Hollywood. I felt like Christianity had given up on Hollywood, you know, and we always talk about us versus them. The disdain, the vitriol, antagonism within American Christianity against Hollywood is so deep and so profound. And I wanted to come and I wanted to see this community come into faith. I wanted to take all that creativity and mobilize it for good. And I wanted to be a part of this world, not to be famous, but to teach people how to be great. And that's been a really beautiful thing. And so, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, look at the world you're in and look at the people you get to hang out with. But if you look at my Instagram, it's a very rare thing for me to ever post a picture of anyone well-known or anyone famous. And I've, that even bothers me a little bit, how Christianity, it seems like now, tries to market itself by its attachment to famous people. And my kids would ask me, how come you never posted about all these people that you've been around all your life? And I goes, it never occurred to me to use their fame for my personal benefit. And so when you ask about what are the micro choices, they're not really micro choices, the macro choices. That you don't do this for yourself. You choose to live a life of servanthood. I went after the extreme poor, and God eventually jettisoned my life to start reaching the extreme influentials in the world. And I think that's why God felt like he could trust me.
Erwin, I'm so deeply humbled and in admiration of everything you just said there. I'd love to know, because I think I cannot go past this without asking this. Then for those that are driven by the blue verified check on Instagram, the more followers, the platform, the microphone, I think you've modeled something so significant that all of us need to not only get a hold of it, but internalize from a core value perspective. How do we make the about face? How do we make the right turn and return, not just in behavior, but in heart motivation? I mean, it is repentance, but I want to dive even deeper with you and just ask you, as a leader, as someone who obviously is trusted by the Lord, how would you tell all of us and encourage all of us to say, hey, make the right turn in your heart? Where do we start?
Well, I kind of work from the hopeful assumption that everyone already wants to do the right thing. That, because I look at it and go, if I want to try to be the kind of person that I would admire, I think it's inside of all of us. I don't think I'm unique in that. I just think that the more opportunities for fame you have, the harder that battle and that challenge is. And our culture just is not helpful. I mean, I spoke at a huge Christian event a couple of years ago, and they asked me to do an interview afterwards on a podcast. And the question they asked me right away was, well, Erwin, you just spoke here at this event, and, you had this level of success. How do you deal with this level of success in your life? And I told them, I said, I thought I was successful before I spoke at your event. And speaking at your event isn't the measure of success. And this is the problem, is that on stage, you guys keep telling people to pursue the right things. But the truth is, even your platform, you actually don't believe that. And I thought I was successful when I was pastoring 50 people, guts out, trying to serve people and helping one person at a time kind of faith. It's only like American Christianity that told me I wasn't successful. And so I would just say, just celebrate the small victories in your life, and celebrate the small things that God does in the lives of other people, and recognize the beauty in that. And if God chooses to expand that and grow that, then that's like a gift, And it's kind of an odd thing, because like as a writer, I'm completely dependent on readers for my success. I don't have a gift that exists in isolation. If no one reads my writing, I'm not a writer. And people talk to me about a communication gift. I go, the crazy thing is that a communication gift, if I have the gift of preaching or speaking, it's completely dependent on the listener. Like if there is no listener, if no one is absorbing what I'm teaching and doing something with it, my teaching has fallen flat. It is that metaphor, if the tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, doesn't make any noise. If you have the gift of leadership, what exactly is that gift? Because if people aren't the value, you're the tree falling in the forest and no one hears it.
Yeah.
And so I just say is, look, no matter how gifted or talented you are, spend your life measuring your life not on what you've accomplished, but how your life has touched and affected other people. Because that's really so the only measure of life.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, to that, I'd love to explore this with you, because we're talking about the desire for ambition, and then behind that, I think, is anxiety and fear. And as we started the conversation by saying depression, anxiety is just rampant. The numbers are escalating at fever pitch levels here in 2019. And we know that the soul is our mind and will and emotions. And that's where the worry and the fear and the anxiety manifest. But I tend to believe like that chronic bouts with these emotions probably stems from a deeper place. And that's like Proverbs 18:14 talks about. That's a broken spirit. And it's from the broken spirit that the soul wounds thrive. Do you have any thoughts about that, Erwin, in terms of bringing healing to that deep broken spirit?
Yeah. I tend to not think in, I don't know, like categories as much. And because, you know, I find it really difficult, right? Because when you think about, like, when we talk about the mind and the heart and emotions and thoughts, and, you know, I do think we have to define things to try to make sense of ourselves. But when I think of like our spirit or the broken spirit, like, I don't think of it as something as like other than us. It's just us.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does. You know? Yes.
A part of, like, I think what Western thought has done is that it has segmented us.
Yes.
And so then we're trying to fix ourselves in different compartments, but the compartments all are one compartment. They all, maybe they're different elements inside of the same soup, but it's still the same soup. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so maybe we have to replace some of the elements or some of the ingredients in that soup, or enhance them or improve them. But the soup is the soup, and it's who we are. And, you know, so I think about, like, if we think about like thoughts and emotions, right?
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if this is still the most advanced description, but years ago, the way I understood a piece of information in the human brain that information in our brain is like 1/7 data and then 6/7 emotion or experience. And which is why if we don't experience something, we forget it. And so a mathematician actually experiences numbers, and so they remember the numbers. And if you kind of look at that way, go, okay, really, there's not a difference in that sense between facts and feelings. They're integrated together. They're not separate. And so, you know, I deal with people all the time who go, well, no, I'm logical. And I'm like, you know, your logic is completely fueled by your emotions.
Yeah.
And other people, well, you know, I'm a feeling person, but your feelings are shaped by how you're processing data and information.
Yes.
Neither one of them is disconnected from the other. And the same way with our broken spirit, like whatever part of us is broken, it's just us. The problem is this, like, if you lose a leg, you're an amputee, you come to Jesus, you grow in your faith, and you're still an amputee, and no one thinks your faith is lacking.
Right. But
you come to Jesus and you've been traumatized psychologically, emotionally.
Sure.
You were abused as a child. You were you experienced emotional neglect. Maybe you were not touched as an infant. You felt this huge sense of abandonment before you categorized memories. And your soul is broken. You're an amputee, but no one sees the missing part of your soul. So they treat that as if it's a superficial wound. Mm-hmm. But a wound of the spirit, a wound of the human spirit, is more profoundly human than losing an arm or losing a leg. Because if I lose an arm, I am still fully human.
Yeah.
But if I lose my ability to love or to trust, I've actually become dehumanized.
Yeah. You wrote, Erwin, that so many of us see pain as the boundary of our limitations. And you continued and said, when we experience pain, that's when we choose to stop. How do we hurdle that mindset and core belief? Is it knowing ahead of time that the path of inner peace is going to involve pain? What do we do?
You know, this is a real challenge because people definitely have different levels of pain thresholds.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and both physical pain, emotional pain, relational pain, and there is also like a dark side to this which I don't really write about it as much in the book, because when a person stops feeling, they actually begin to harm themselves because the pain is the only thing they feel. And a lot of self-harm comes from a person not being able to feel anymore. And it's the only feeling that makes them feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be the very same way relationally. The reason a person keeps moving into destructive relationships is that they are too afraid to have relationships that are healthy because they're not capable of having healthy relationships. So they look for broken relationships because that relationship matches their level of brokenness. And so some people develop an immensely high tolerance for the wrong kind of pain because they only feel alive when they're in pain. And that's a dark side of it that I do not really go into in the book, but I think we have to be careful because there's some people who don't know how to enjoy life. And I find a lot of people of faith like this. They think God's always punishing them. God's always condemning them. God's always judging them. And because of that, they're always judging people, condemning people, and belittling people. If you don't learn how to enjoy life and celebrate life, you're going to live a life where you think pain is the only real emotion or human experience. At the same time, I'm going to say I guess, on the generational scale, I'm supposed to be like a baby boomer. And I think one of the things baby boomers did is they tried really hard to make sure their kids had no pain. And then their kids did that even more for their kids. So we have a generational dilemma of kids that have grown up experiencing very, very little pain. And because of that, they're in extreme pain because they never learned pain tolerance. And, it's an odd thing, like when you don't know who your father is and you don't know where you belong in the world and you don't know if you're loved and you feel abandoned or you are abandoned, you develop such a high capacity to take pain, to realize I can get through this. But if you grow up and there's very little failure, there's very little disappointment, you don't actually develop the internal resilience to deal with pain. So I think we have a lot of people generationally who think they're in a lot of pain because they are, but it's not because they have a high pain threshold, but it's because their pain threshold is so low that they experience a high amount of pain really quickly. And you have to begin to develop new emotional, psychological muscles to deal with pain. That's why I tell people in their 20s right now, fail a lot. All right, just do stuff that is a huge risk. Own 2 or 3, 4 really big failures so that you can know failure is not terminal. And you have to learn how to develop these muscles so you can have a higher pain tolerance, because greatness always comes on the other side of pain. It never comes without pain.
Yeah. What does it mean then on the flip side of that, Erwin, to give our strength to the wrong thing? You talk about it in the book. You said there's nothing more debilitating, in fact, I believe is how you worded it, than giving our strength to the wrong thing. Will you drill down on that in context?
Sure. It's funny. The first thing that comes to my mind, it didn't come to my mind in the book at all, but is that when the Bible actually uses that language, it's talking about sex.
Oh my gosh. It's true.
I don't know why it never occurred to me until you asked it that way. And I thought it's funny because this is why it's like when you're young, you end up using your strength on stupid things because you're,
yeah.
Right? And then when you're looking back, you're going, oh my gosh, I used up all my strength on things that didn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that, a huge part of it is to realize that when you're young, you seem to have a lot of energy, but you don't necessarily have a lot of focus for that energy. And as you get older, you realize, okay, I have diminishing energy, so I need to really have focus because I need to use the energy I have really well. So I guess the optimal situation is to be young and have great focus.
Yeah.
so that you take that energy and you apply it really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And another option too is as you get older to make sure you keep your energy up. And I think I ended up, I think when I was around 50, I kind of lost all the friends I had up to that point. Because at 50, they were all getting ready for retirement. And they all used language of landing the plane. They all used language of coming to the end of their time. They all use language of, it's sometimes a good way, like passing it on. And at 50, I thought to myself, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
I'm just figuring things out. There are so many things I have not yet learned. There's so much I must create. There's so many things I have to risk. And in my mind, the older I got, the more risk I should take because I have less to lose. I mean, I'm closer to death than everyone now. So I'm
Yeah.
So I just started my 60s. So I'm like, okay, I should be more courageous. I should take more risks. I should care less about what people think. I should live a life of no obligation but complete intention. And ironically, I lost a lot of my friends because they were ready to stop. And I'm like, I can't hang with people who are ready to retire. I want to hang with people who want to set the world on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's why the average age of our church is 26. It's because, the people in their 20s at Mosaic, they're like, we want to change the world.
Yeah.
And we don't, they're not going to follow someone who just wants to chill and coast on the momentum of their past. For me, anything I've done in the past is irrelevant to the credibility of my leading now going forward. I have to choose to live this life now. And that's what I would say in terms of don't give your strength to the wrong things. I look back and think I did so many things because I was just trying to fit in. I just wanted to belong. And I did so many things out of obligation. And that for me is my core thing. I tell people, stop living a life of obligation. Start living a life of intention. Stop blaming other people for your life and start taking responsibility for your life.
I can't think of a better way to finish this conversation with you. That is, I mean, my mind is racing a million miles an hour, not only because of the content of the book, but Erwin, you are such a wellspring of wisdom for my generation, and I can't thank you enough for joining me here today. If there's anything else you'd love to just encourage my friends hanging out with us right now, I'd love to turn that over to you just once again to encourage them. But this has been mind-blowing. Thank you.
Well, no, so thank you so much. This interview has been wonderful, and it's good to have a conversation with you. And I have to tell you, one of the things that struck me so much in just the first month of the book being out is, I mean, I've had the opportunity to write, I think, 10 books in my life, and The Way of the Warrior has had the fastest response in the most extreme level. I've had people emailing me or DMing me, telling me I walked in to end my life, and I walked out finding hope for my life. And I think that this is not just an epidemic. We're on the edge of a terminal epidemic. And I would just encourage people, even if, you read the book and just pull out the quotes to share with people in your life, because I'm telling you, the people all around you are struggling with this stuff, even if they're not telling you. And if they had the opportunity to finally open up their inner world to someone, they would. You're going to save someone's life by having this conversation. You may even save your own. And that's why I'm so committed to this book. I think this message is really important for this moment in history.
Yeah. Wow. Erwin, thank you. I mean, I just can't say it enough. Thank you for this. I'm going to go back and listen to it probably 10 times over and then send 20 copies of the book to friends, because we need this message right now. My generation needs this. Multiple generations need this, because I think, again, as you said, we're on the precipice of not only greatness, but if we don't harness what's actually born inside of us, it could be collapse. And I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. Hey, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, Erwin. Take care.
All right, you too.
That conversation with Erwin McManus will be one I revisit over and over. As I think about my own life, the greatest personal challenges I've ever faced have been exacerbated by a complete lack of inner peace. Like Erwin said, the world around us is not disconnected from the world within us. I'm going to say that again. The world around us is not disconnected from the world within us. Now, what's really important to remember, my friend, is that personal struggle is not a lack of faith, exactly like he said in our conversation. In fact, it is the journey of faith. So what does that mean? It means that because you and I are more than conquerors in all things, in Jesus' name, we will have to conquer something. What is it for you? Maybe it's fear, doubt, insecurity, the compulsion to be perfect, or whatever else. I think I fit in all those categories, to be honest with you. But Jesus gave us his very own peace. So let's be people who pursue that which has already been made available to us and then learn each and every day how to appropriate it into our life. Again, my friend, Erwin's new book, The Way of the Warrior, An Ancient Path to Inner Peace, is available right now. So please go get your copy. Links to purchase are in the show notes right now at wintoday.tv. Well, next week here on the show, I'm joined once again by Ken Coleman, host of the wildly popular Entree Leadership Podcast, which is a Dave Ramsey brand, and of course, the Ken Coleman Show. And guys, Ken's passion is to help people like you and like me get out of jobs we hate and instead work in the career we love by employing what he calls the proximity principle. Here's a little preview.
We all have a flame, and if you are breathing right now, I got good news for you. You're not burned out. Now there's coming a day where the flame is extinguished, and that's when we slip into eternity. Until then, there's a flame there. Now, buildup is the reason you don't see or feel or smell the flame. You know, when I'm sitting in front of a fire, there's 3 senses that are engaged. I see the flame, I feel the flame, and I smell the flame. Okay, so the buildup can cover up your heart. So picture your flame as like a light. And if I put multiple blankets over a light, the light's still on, but I can't see the light.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for you to hear that episode next week. Listen, if you are like the 70% of Americans who hate their jobs and you're looking for a change, you do not want to miss my episode right here on Win Today next week with Ken Coleman. Well, guys, thanks again for joining my conversation this week with the one, with the only Erwin McManus. Again, go get his book, The Way of the Warrior, An Ancient Path to Inner Peace. Right now, links to purchase are in the show notes over at wintoday.tv. Hey, listen, many of you are brand new to the show, and if you are, I'd like you to hit that subscribe button right now on whichever podcast host you use. That way, each and every week, fresh new content will hit your device automatically. And then, if you would, take 30 seconds right now and go to the Apple Podcast app and rate and review the show. It would mean so much to me because in doing so, you're helping me increase the listenership and exposure of Win Today. Guys, let's hang out on social media. I'm at 00Chris Cook on Instagram, on Twitter, and of course on Facebook. And until next week, visit me over at wintoday.tv for blog posts and for archive podcasts, all aimed at helping you design your roadmap to wholeness from the inside out, spirit, soul, and body. I can't wait to talk to you again next week when we are joined by Ken Coleman. Get ready to learn how to step into the career of your dreams, my friend. I believe in you so much. We'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.